The new science of physical health.
To the Longevity Builder podcast. If you've never met me before, my name is Shane Stubbs. I have been a health and physical education teacher in Australian schools, can't even believe I'm going to say this, since way back in 1985. That means as I record this, it's my 41st year of being in classrooms. Over 50,000 one-hour lessons on those two disciplines that I'm obsessed with, health and physical education. Plus, in the last 6 years of my career, maybe extending a bit more, I've had the opportunity to sit down with, consult with and work with and interview on my podcast more than 100 expert PhDs from around the globe, not just here in Australia. People from Norway, the United States of America, right where today's main guest comes from in Dallas, Texas. Probably my favorite all-time doctor to interview was Dr. Kenneth Cooper from the famed Longevity Center, if you like, the Dallas Cooper Clinic. So John Ranello, who is my special guest here, 75-year-old John Ranello, more about that in just a moment, my special guest. I interviewed Dr. Kenneth Cooper, doctors from here in Australia, Dr. Dick Telford, a famous professor of exercise physiology and also a childhood physical activity researcher. And what I've done over the past 6 years with those interviews, which are available on my podcast, Longevity Builder, the audio versions where they're mostly stored, is that I have now created a beautiful, comes out when I turn 60 later this year, 2026, as I record this, a beautiful 240-page hardcover book called Longevity Builder, hence the name of where that comes from, plus a brilliantly designed with our technology team, Longevity Builder Health Lab software. More about that on the time, because I want to get tucked into what you're about to experience, which is one of the best interviews I've ever done on this podcast. Over the past 6 years, almost entirely, my guests have been PhDs. A couple of Australian celebrities, a couple of business leaders from around the world, but mostly PhDs. John Ranello, who you're going to meet, 75-year-old John Ranello, is the first person that I've ever interviewed who's just a regular person like me and a regular person like you. You're about to find out why. Just before, for those of you watching the YouTube version of this particular podcast, I want to give you about a minute's worth of some short video clips that John has sent to me that he makes available on social media, largely through his Facebook account. Just type in his name, John Ranello, of him taking part in what I call, I was interviewing this 87-year-old doctor, a doctor of molecular biology from King's College in London. And doctor, can you believe it? Dr. Norman Lazarus. What a good name for a longevity doctor. So here's a PhD in molecular medicine. And I was talking to Dr. Lazarus, and I said to him that I came up with this expression. I don't know where this came from, just down in my head somewhere as a teacher, called the correct dose of physical activity. The reason that I wanted to invite John onto my podcast as the very first person in the Longevity Builder podcast that's not a doctor and not some type of business leader or celebrity is because of what you're going to see over the next 1 minute. Watch this if you're on YouTube. If you're not and you're on the audio version, go across to the YouTube channel, The New Science of Physical Health, and watch what John does, because this is the very reason that I wanted to set up what I'm now going to share with you, a 3-part mini-series. And we'll go through what the name of that is in just a moment. Watch John. I'll be right back in a minute. So now you know why I wanted to interview John. It just blew my mind watching those video clips. And he's sending me more, and you'll obviously see all of those on his social media account on Facebook. And as he said, I just can't wait to get the next one. They are fascinating for me to watch. John's 15 years older than me. Oh, I thought I was having a go at 60. That's an expression we have in Australia, having a go. It's a colloquialism. And I thought I was having a go. John Ranello is a human being that's having a go. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to put together a 3-part mini-series. I've got a couple of notes here on my screen. Here's what the episodes are going to be called. Episode 1, the human body. How to build a system that is hard to kill. Now, I talked with John about the title of the episode of the podcast, and that's the one he and I settled on. Make your body hard to kill. You're going to find out from this particular longevity builder episode, I believe, in a better way than anything I've done before to show you how that works in real life, and you can duplicate the same thing. That's episode 1, how to build a system that is hard to kill. Episode 2, the brain. We're going to look into, John and I talk about this, but we're going to look into it called how to stay neurologically hard to kill. That's the theme of the whole 3-part mini-series. Then the last one of the episode is going to be called episode 3, the risk. We're going to roll this out in the coming weeks, each of the episodes. Episode 3, the risk. How to compress disease probability and become structurally hard to kill. All right, those are the 3. That's the 3 parts that we're going to put together and share with you. And what we've got to do, here's how the format of each episode is going to go. I'm going to do a little narrative at the start of each episode. Then you're going to hear from John and myself discussing something about that particular topic from each of the 3 different parts of the mini-series. So it might be 10 or 15 minutes of John and I sharing some conversation together. He's in Dallas, Texas. I'm here in Sydney, Australia. And then I got a really special treat. We're going to give you a few minutes of one of the doctors that I've interviewed and a recording that I've done with them, some of the most esteemed PhDs, professors, and doctors of molecular medicine, doctors of cardiology, doctors of a whole different area. We're going to insert some sections of doctors talking that I've interviewed about the topic that John and I just spoke about. Then I'll come back to me with a bit more narrative, and then back to the conversation that John and I had. That's the format of this particular mini-series, Hard to Kill. What John wants, he's so good at sharing. What he wants to get across to you is what's in it for you as the person listening or the person watching this particular podcast. And I love the fact that he came up with that particular title, because I gave him an option of 10 different titles, and that was the one that I had picked as well, Hard to Kill. So we both agreed on that, even though we're literally half a world away from each other. He's about 16,000 miles from me. And I'll just touch on this before we lean into episode number 1. What impressed me the most when I was watching these videos by John is I'm watching these videos, and I said this to him, I'm thinking to myself, how does this guy think? What's going through his mind when he's 15 years older than me? And I thought, I'm kind of getting up there at 60 years old, and he's putting his body through what I call the correct dose of physical activity that's making his body hard to kill. You're going to find out all about how that works from the conversation he and I had, and from the conversations I've had with doctors that link into our conversation. Had a little bit of narrative from me, a little education narrative. But I'm continually thinking to myself, how does this guy think? Does he think like I do? Watch out for it in the interview as he and I are discussing the whole mental approach to this topic in the Longevity Builder series called Hard to Kill. All right, everybody, let's crank it out. Episode number 1. Welcome to Longevity Builder, my podcast here from Australia, which interestingly enough has a very large audience in the United States and goes to 90. We have 97 countries that listen to the program. So I am so delighted about this interview, though, John, because for everyone who is tuning in, I discovered your content on Facebook, and it just blew my mind Like, I'm 60 in about 60 days from this recording, and here I am, like it just kept coming up. I'm going, this is unbelievable. Watching your physical activity sessions and the variety that you do, which is just fabulous. I'm going 74 years old, soon to be 75. Like,
I am 75 now.
That congratulations on being 75. That's why I had to reach out to you, seriously. So just for my audience, so that we can then get straight into this, cut straight into meat and potatoes. Before I do, what did you do as a working career? What was your background?
Well, I have been in the fitness industry for 53 years. I started when I was 22 years old.
Wow.
And I have been in the fitness industry, and for the past 25 years, I have been a personal trainer. I still work 4 days a week. I train 28 people a week. I look forward to going to work every day. I want to help people. I'm popular because I guess of what I'm doing, but I have over 30 people waiting to train for me. So I train 28 people every week, but I have 30 people on a waiting list, and I can't give them away to other people. So that's a good thing to have, I think.
Yeah.
So I want to share my 53 years worth of knowledge with your audience today, and be happy to give them anything I can think of that can help them.
The floor is yours, because I'm fascinated by a person, because my whole concept of education, which is my background, is learning to become a longevity builder. And it's great for me to go and interview all the doctors, and I mainly interview doctors on the show here. But what fascinates me more is someone who's a practitioner that's 15 years older than me. And that's why I want it. So the floor is yours. Let's start talking about what your approach is to the concept of longevity.
Yes, I think the first thing I want to share with everyone is that I think we have to have this inner motivation that builds everything that I do, from my exercise to my sleep to my eating well to all the studying that I do. Revolves around one particular topic, and that's my need to bring forward my idea of total health. And this is what I want to share with the audience today: what we need to do to be totally healthy. And of course, let's start with neurological health, which is the health of our brain.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I interviewed a PhD in molecular medicine and vascular medicine from Norway, and that's her whole field of study at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Dr. Atefe Tari is about how the brain improves from exactly what you said, the neurological health of your brain, Alzheimer's and dementia. So I want to hear from your end as a practitioner what you do with people.
Well, for all neurological diseases come from our brain cells dying. And now all of a sudden we find out we can grow new brain cells. This is shocking, because before we thought we had all the brain cells we're ever going to have when we were a child. But no. And what stimulates the growth of new brain cells? Exercise, especially cardiovascular exercise, high intensity interval training, weight training, and all that. So every time I'm exercising, I'm thinking to myself, this is building new brain cells. And so my favorite exercise, and the one I think is the key to staying young, is sprinting.
Yes.
I get out and I sprint just one time a week, but all week long I'm training so that I can sprint. So I'm working on my flexibility. I'm working on my high intensity interval training. I'm certainly lifting weights 2 or 3 times a week, all in preparation for being able to sprint. Now, when I sprint, this is releasing all these neurochemicals in my brain: dopamine, norepinephrine, all these feel-good things that are free, and you don't have to pay for them. And it comes in the proper dosage when we exercise. So after I exercise, my friends will say, "You're laughing out loud." Well, I'm laughing because it's making me feel so good.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Can I just say on the sprinting thing, one of your videos that I watched was you indoors. It looks like an American football field, and you have little small foam blocks that you're sprinting over the top of.
Yeah,
I'm watching that, and I gotta tell you something. This is on the topic of sprinting, right? So I'm on the treadmill the other day, and I'm doing. It's one of those treadmills where you have to make it work. It's not a belt-driven one. It's I don't know what you call them. Anyway, I'm on that Studio One. And when I was a teenager here in Australia, when I was 13 and 14 years old, I could run 12 seconds over 100 meters, which for a kid my age, that was fast in the area that I was and fast in my state. Yes. And remembering that Australia has the same population as the whole of Texas, by the way. So that gives you an indication of just how big it was. But I was a fast kid. I can't believe you talked about sprinting. I was looking at some stuff this week because I went on the treadmill and I started doing these 30-second intervals, resting and then go like for a few minutes and going as hard as I could. And I comfortably got up to 16 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
And I don't know what that is in miles, maybe 7 or 8 miles an hour, something like that. And then I started using some AI to figure out, well, what was my speed when I was a teenager? So I turned 60, and part of this was inspired by watching your video sessions of you sprinting online. And so I sat down and worked out, well, how fast could I actually go? And at my age, I can get to right now around 22 kilometers per hour on the treadmill. Right?
That's great.
Yeah, which is fast. So I've made a decision, and we can follow this together, and I'll do some videoing of it. I want to go back as I build up my fitness over this, when I turn 60 this year, and between 60 and 61, and I'm going to go and compete in some 100-meter races for men's 60 to 64 category in Australia. And I'm going to give it a go because I looked at what the winning times were for men for Australian competition. And if I can hit my target, which is so my best ever time as a kid was 12 seconds, right? So that's a long time ago. But if I hit my target and I train properly, exactly what you just said, once a week, I'm thinking I can get to about 15 and a half seconds, which would probably
be good. Let me give your audience a little advice here. So think back to when you were in the best shape of your life.
Yeah.
You were probably sprinting, playing soccer, or whatever sport.
Basketball. You do. You play basketball. I play basketball.
I do. It does. So all of this has to do with sprinting. We're not really just walking around slowly. Now, if we're going to try to sprint when we're older, I've taken hundreds of men and women, taught them how to sprint. Now, if you remember when we played sports, we took a long time to warm up. There was a big warm up before you go out and play the game. Remember, we all warmed up. So that's something that adults forget. Number one, I do a 40-minute warm-up exercise every day. Just like I brush my teeth when I get up, I have a little 40-minute stretching routine that I do where I do all kinds of different things. And so I prepare myself. So if I was advising someone now, you can look online and find sprinting drills that you do real easy, high knee, heel kick up type of thing. And you learn these little drills and you start sprinting at a very easy pace until you can work yourself up. So you don't go right out and say, I want to sprint like I did when I was 15 years old. You have to take a little time and get yourself, acclimated to the challenge. Now, sprinting is so good, we don't realize it. The body doesn't know how old you are. The body is responding to what you're doing. So if I'm sprinting, it's going to give me all kinds of neurochemicals and growth factors that's going to make me feel better and make me want to sprint again. If I'm sitting on the couch doing nothing, then I'm not going to get much response. Another important aspect of brain health is, believe it or not, doing complex motor skills. Like, for example, as an adult, learn something new, teach yourself to juggle. Juggling, becoming ambidextrous.
Doing that with some blue balls,
Yes, those are 5 pounds medicine balls that I'm actually juggling there.
Wow.
And so juggling, doing all kinds of complex things. If you notice, I do a lot of footwork on agility ladders and things like that. Okay, so exercise stimulates new brain growth, and it releases a compound called brain-derived neurotrophin factor.
BDNF,
BDNF, which acts like fertilizer on the brain cells. So the brain cells grow and make new connections and connect to other brain cells.
All right, everybody, let's leave that part of my conversation with John Ranello right there. We're going to come back to him in a little while's time. Now we need to move into the next component of this particular episode, hard to kill, the human body, how to make your body hard to kill, how to make it disease resistant. One of the best ways to do that is to bring to you in conjunction with my interview with John, two doctors right now. One as a PhD, a professor of exercise physiology, and the other one has a degree, a medical degree in molecular medicine. Unbelievable. So, what you're about to hear is about 7 minutes of a conversation I had with two doctors, two PhDs from the esteemed, and it really is esteemed, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and from the fact that both of these doctors are from the Faculty of Medicine, and specifically in the Cardiac Exercise Research Group. One of them is a specialist in the area that John just finished talking about, in the area of Alzheimer's and dementia, neurology in the brain, like a specialist, like a Dr. Atefe Tari. I'll talk about her second of all because she's the one I want to concentrate on the most. But I've got to introduce you to, for the first time ever, if you have not heard these episodes before, Professor Ulrik Wisløff. Great accent, by the way. I love the Norwegian accent. Let me tell you about the credibility, credentials, and research of Professor Ulrik Wisløff before you hear from him. He's the head of the Cardiac Exercise Research Group, as I've said, at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU, and an honorary professor, can you believe this, at the University of Queensland right here in Australia. So he comes out and does sabbaticals in Australia. When I interviewed him for the first time back in 2020, this interview is from last year, I didn't know that. I had no idea that he was a honorary professor at the University of Queensland in Australia. So he loves our country, which is terrific. Let me talk to you about his credibility. He is widely considered as the world's most cited exercise physiologist, PhD in exercise physiology, with over 340 peer-reviewed publications, with more than 127,000 citations of his work, that has shaped global physical activity guidelines. Professor Wisløff, the guy you're about to hear from, in 2020, he received the Heart Research Award from King Harald V of Norway. His key innovation is an algorithm called activity quotient points. It's a scientific formula based on his research. Some of my other episodes in this podcast series talk about the depth of his research, but it is not extrapolated research from large cohorts of people by itself. It's actual research he's done on individuals. It's amazing. It's an algorithm that translates heart rate data into a single score called activity quotient points. His research shows that maintaining 100 activity quotient points weekly on a rolling 7 days, we'll talk about that later on in the series, can extend life by an average of 8 to 15 years and make your body hard to kill, make it disease resistant. I'm not going to dive into that right now. I'm going to dive into that a little bit later on. So, he was a pioneer in proving that high intensity interval physical activity is safe and more effective than moderate exercise for heart failure patients and for the general public. I'll just finish off on this. This wasn't in my notes, but this is in my head because I've done this reading before after I met with Professor Wisløff in last year, 2025. Every researcher that you see on the internet, if you go to Google has a scoring system, okay, based on, it's called a H-index score. So, based on how much a professor's research has been cited across the world and how many times and by what institutions, you get a H-index score. So, a professor who has a H-index score of 20 is considered to be well-credentialed and a very good professor. A professor that has a H-index score of 40 is considered to be an expert. So people around the world looking at their research, peer-reviewed, published in medical journals, has a score of 40 from Google, that's considered to be an expert. A world leader has a score of 60, a H-index score of 60, a world leader in their field. So in this particular field, exercise physiology, Professor Wisløff, you're about to hear from. Then, I want to tell you what Professor Wisløff's last score was that I looked at. 96. World leaders considered to have a H-index score of 60. He has a H-index score of 96. That's why he's the most cited exercise physiologist in the world. He's able to translate research into practical outcomes that you and I can use. More about that later in the series. So that's Professor Wisløff. Now, what was John Ranello just talking about? The link. Dr. Atefe Tari, a postdoctoral researcher at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology at the Cardiac Exercise Research Group, and a rising star in the exercises medicine movement. Her focus. Dr. Tari, who you're going to hear from, her research bridges the gap between the heart and the brain. She's a leading voice on how your oxygen efficiency score. Now, the doctors have got a different name for it than that. That's my educational name. I call it your oxygen efficiency score. You'll hear of it known in medical circles as your CRF score, Cardiorespiratory Fitness. Dr. Kenneth Cooper, the pioneer of all of this from Dallas, where John lives, calls it CRF in the medical research. So the common medical literacy has it as your cardiorespiratory fitness score. So Dr. Tari is the leading voice in the world on how someone with a very high cardiorespiratory fitness score, John Ranello, has an off-the-chart high VO2 Max or cardiorespiratory fitness score for his age. So it's all based on age and gender. So you're classified as poor, below average, average, above average, and then into the superior category. John is in the top 1% for his age and gender. Now, by the way, as you go along in this series, you're going to find out about your oxygen efficiency score. That's what my first learning framework called the Oxygen Shield. The higher that is, the better. But John's score, which he messaged me about, was 48.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute. For a 75-year-old man, top 1% in the world. Now, here's the key, though. Anybody, and I know John agrees with me on this, anybody can arrive at that point. It's not a, here's how everyone is ranked, and if you're at this, you're locked into this score. So if you're at 35 milliliters per kilogram per minute for a 75-year-old man, you're locked into that score. No, you can change that score. It's very, very, very flexible. More about that. Dr. Tari, her major research is called the exercised blood or exercised plasma, blood plasma. She has led groundbreaking research exploring whether transferring plasma from people with elite oxygen efficiency scores and donating it to a patient with early stage Alzheimer's can improve brain function. That's her research. Been doing it since 2020. The Lancet published it in 2025, the first publication from her research over a 5-year period, a definitive review on the neuroprotective mechanisms of exercise, proving that the correct dose of physical activity, we talk more about what that is throughout this series, can reduce dementia risk by up to 40%. Fascinating research. This is what she told me a year ago before this publication in the Lancet came out. She said to me in our interview that they were transferring blood plasma from people who had elite oxygen efficiency scores into patients with early onset dementia. And she told me, Dr. Tari said to me, 2 of the patients had to drop out of the study. I go, oh, why is that? She said, because their early onset dementia went away. Oh, I was mind-boggled. The whole emphasis of the longevity builder, so on the front cover of my book and the front of my software, the Longevity Builder Health Lab, it says this: use the one single tactic that can radically extend your life. It's about increasing your oxygen efficiency score, which is why I was so attracted to the work that I saw on social media that John Ranello was doing. See the links now? See how I'm linking this together? Let me bring to you now 7 minutes of my conversation, much longer conversation I did have with Professor Ulrik Wisløff and Dr. Atefe Tari, a PhD in molecular medicine, and her work on brain research. So I just want to set this up correctly. You're going to hear me asking a question of Dr. Tari about a concept that she told me called a symphony of molecules. That's where this conversation starts. You're also going to hear about something called 100 pi points, PAI. That's a terminology that used to be used by Professor Wisløff for a number of years, but in 2025 it got converted to a new concept called activity quotient points, not physical activity intelligence points, which is what it originally was. So I just wanted to explain that before you get to hear from Dr. Tari. So really what we're going to be hearing from is Dr. Tari talk about a symphony of molecules, and every time you hear pi points, just replace that in your mind with AQ points, activity quotient points, which is the new measurement from Professor Wisløff. I think you said, or Ulrik said, a symphony of molecules that are happening as a result of hitting 100 pi points.
Yes.
And so what are these molecules that's causing like a medicine inside the body, which is this awesome description?
Yeah. So we see that healthy heart and healthy brain are closely connected.
Yeah.
And that being fit is good for you. So then we're trying to understand the mechanisms of why that is. And one of our main hypotheses is that there's something happening in your systemic environment, so in your blood. There are factors being released into your blood when you exercise that are the driver behind this beneficial effect that we see with exercise.
So, and the new thing is that I didn't know, that I didn't learn when I was studying, is that most molecules either directly or indirectly cross the blood-brain barrier. So what is produced here also goes up.
It goes across the blood-brain barrier.
You might produce something in your muscles that treats the brain.
Right.
So that's what we saw when we saw these results from University of Stanford, where they have sewn together an old mouse with a young mouse so that they have shared circulatory system.
Yeah.
And found that the old mouse getting this young blood into its capillaries, that affects the brain, both the behavioral, the cognitive function, as well as formation of new neurons, etc. So then we thought that, okay, but what about exercise blood? We will think that would be more impactful than just young blood.
Yeah.
And so we tested that, and as Ulrik said, we gave injections into the tail vein with exercise blood.
This is into rats.
Rats, yeah. And then we saw an effect in their brains. We saw that this exercise plasma being injected into the tail vein actually results in a higher formation of new neurons in the Alzheimer's brain of these rats compared to those who just get saline.
And do you see it in just some of the rats, or do you see it across lots of them where you do that process?
Yeah, we see it in several rats. Yeah.
Right. So, is it sometimes you don't see much of an impact, or is it generally there's an impact every time you do that?
Yeah, so we have found that it's a significant difference in the groups of rats who receive exercise plasma versus the group of rats who receive, for example, plasma from sedentary rats, or those who receive saline.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it can also be about timing of when they receive it, according to where they are in the disease stage.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, so we have also studied, can we interfere with the disease progression?
Yeah.
If we treat the rats at 2 months of age, before the pathology is really established in the brain?
Yeah.
And what about when it is established in the brain and we have this plaque pathology? Can we also then impact disease progression? So we're studying at different.
And so you're trying to work. You haven't worked that out. Haven't had enough time yet to work that out.
No, we know a little bit about it, but we think that, and many others think that, the reason that there is actually no cure for Alzheimer's disease is that the disease is
diagnosed too late. So the process in the brain has gone too far. So it's no chance to reverse it.
Yeah.
And we also think that that's why exercise training and fitness and PI may be such a strong protector against dementia and other diseases. Is that
so slowing down any potential progression?
Yeah, because they have been showing that the disease may start even 30 years before you see any symptoms.
Wow.
So, and that's what we are also working on, that I didn't mention today, but Atefe and her team is working on discovering new molecules in blood to predict Alzheimer's disease, because we have from the Hunt studies where we have blood up to 30 years before they get dementia or not. So then we are in a position to say, okay, by screening the blood, we can say, okay, these 2 molecules or these 10 or this single one is what we should screen the population. Because today you have to do spinal puncture and you can't screen our population on that. But you can if you can go to the pharmacy and take a blood test and say, okay, you have increased level of that, then you can do, then we can probably prevent or delay dementia so you die from something else. So Atefe has a saying that you learn old drugs, new tricks. So it might be that type 2 diabetes actually is the best medicine against dementia.
Okay,
if you start early enough.
Yeah, if you start off. Now that's interesting because I got my coronary calcium score knowing that I have a family, all my family have had heart disease. And I go, I better get this. I'm now 50. I didn't realize I got to 58 so quick. And I go, look, it's going to be high. I know it's high already. So when I get the test, I'm like way over 400, you know, but I'm using all the things with the cardiologist and also the PI Health to do the best at reducing the impact. So here's the question I have. It's in direct relation to what you've just talked about. Have you done much work over the years on the impact of the PI Health on atherosclerosis itself? Like, does it improve the fibrous caps, for example, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so there are some colleagues of us that have done that in collaboration with us as well, where they have used intracoronary ultrasound. So they put an ultrasound into the coronary arteries in the heart, and they see that the plaque composition is better, and the caps or whatever it's called is more stable.
Yes, that's it. That was one of my big things. Is what can I do as a person now? I know I've got advanced atherosclerosis.
And also Ben Levine in Texas, he has shown that if you do high intensity interval training over many years, it might probably increase
calcification.
Yes, but it's more stable and it seems to be safe, and you live much longer than.
Right. So you've got the disease, but you're at a lower risk of having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what I guess maybe the same thing. It's these molecules, this symphony of molecules that's causing that kind of stuff to happen. So it's fascinating. All right, let's now leave that part of the conversation with Professor Wisløff and Dr. Tari and finish that component there and move now to the next section of this first episode in the series, Hard to Kill. I have a brand new free web class. There's a link here in the show notes for people who want to access this free web class. It's a 1-hour web class, and that is depending on when you're listening to this episode, depends whether or not we have got the studio version of the web class up and running, or whether we've got the live version, which we're recording inside this exercise studio where I do most of my work here in Sydney, and we have a live audience. That's going to be a great free web class. And then you may be listening to this particular episode early enough where we've got the website up for the free web class, and the title of the web class is all about one single number that helps to predict heart disease, stroke, and cancer events. So that's what the web class is about. But the details of the web class and that web page, that's already up, and you may get to it and you may just be on the waiting list until such time that the either the studio version of the web class goes up, which is very shortly from this recording, or the live event version goes up into that particular web page. But it's totally free. And what it's about, and the reason I've raised the free web class for you to go and have a look at as a follow-up to this particular episode in this series, Hard to Kill, is in the web class, I have developed 6 learning frameworks. They're 6 education frameworks. So everything I've done for 41 years as a health and physical education teacher in schools is based around frameworks. And then off those frameworks come strategies and then tactics to make use of that framework. The 6 frameworks that I have built prior to meeting John Ranello are all about how to make your body hard to kill, how to make it disease resistant so that you improve longevity, improve health span. So we're going to now, in the back end of this particular episode, examine, and I'm going to share with you an introduction, only an introduction, to 2 of those education or learning frameworks that are exclusive to my work as a longevity builder. And they're really distilled out of, I guess, over the past 6 or so years where I've interviewed PhD after PhD after PhD in different disciplines from all over the world in recognized universities like Professor Wisløff and Dr. Tari, who you just met, and you now know something about their credentials and their recognition and their credibility, if you like. So here are the first two learning frameworks I want to touch on in this episode. I go into the deep side of it in the free web class, but I want to just bring it to light and begin to share with you the first two learning frameworks that relate to what John Ranello spoke to me about in his part of the conversation and what Professor Wisløff and Dr. Tari spoke about. In fact, these 2 learning frameworks, both very much related to the science created by Professor Wisløff over a long 25-30 year career as a professor. So let's talk now about something called the oxygen shield and the AQ engine, activity quotient engine. So when I spoke to John Ranello, who's 75 years of age, and I asked him this question, John, what's your oxygen efficiency score? Now, he knows what that is, and he sent it back to me, and it's 48.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute. When he told me that, I knew immediately, because of my background, this wasn't good for his age. This was rare physiology at the elite end. Not elite because he was born with it, elite because he built it. More about that in a second. So a bit of context. For a man, because based on age and gender, for a man aged 70 to 79, an oxygen efficiency score near 48 places you roughly in the top 1 to 3% of the population. That's fantastic. My oxygen efficiency score is a bit higher than John's, but I'm younger. It's 54.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute. His is 48.5. So I'm 60, a hair's breadth off 60 as I record this, and that sits in the top 5% for my age and gender. So even though mine's higher, John is at the top 1 to 3%, and I'm the top 5% for my age and gender worldwide. Not because I was born with it, and you'll see in a minute, I definitely wasn't, and neither was John. We work for it. But we want to talk about the oxygen shield. So these, by the way, these are not recreational numbers. They are protective numbers. They represent something I call, and this is the learning framework that I developed, the oxygen shield. Let me explain the framework. Most people think that your oxygen efficiency score is about performance. It's not. It's about protection. Imagine your body, is a little analogy. Imagine your body's a city. Oxygen is electricity. If the electricity supply is strong and stable, in that city, hospitals run efficiently, water pumps operate smoothly, traffic lights stay coordinated, emergency systems respond instantly. But what if the electricity is inconsistent? Systems glitch, infrastructure deteriorates, small failures in the city compound. A person with a low oxygen efficiency score, and it decreases naturally if you don't do something about it, over every 1 to 2 years of your life. Every 1 to 2 years of your life as an adult continues to decrease if you don't do something about it. First of all, find out what yours is. But a person with a low oxygen efficiency score for their age and gender, so mine used to be 28 2 years ago, now it's 54, is like brownouts across a city. High oxygen efficiency is a surge protector across every major organ system. That's an analogy of the oxygen shield. Now, here's the part that the diagram explains. When your oxygen efficiency score is low, the shield is thin. It's porous. Diseases get in easily and they grow easily and take hold quickly inside the human body if you have a low oxygen efficiency score. Your internal systems don't, this is the analogy again, don't have a surplus capacity. They're already stressed. Think of it like the medieval city with cracked walls. If attackers arrive, infection, inflammation, metabolic stress, they don't have to break through, they just walk through. And what are those attackers? They are the leading chronic diseases that most adults will face if nothing changes. Heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, obesity, dementia, cancer events. They're not unrelated and random conditions. They cluster. Why do they cluster? Because they share a common, what I call upstream weakness. Poor oxygen delivery, poor oxygen utilization, low mitochondrial capacity. Mitochondria are organelles inside every cell of the human body that produce energy. So low mitochondrial capacity, high inflammatory load, and low metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch between fats and protein and sugar as an energy source. When your oxygen efficiency score remains low for years, these diseases that I just mentioned, they're not bad luck. Cancer events and heart attack and type 2 diabetes and so on. They are a predictable result of a thin biological armor, a thin shield. That's what the oxygen shield is. I mean, here's the shift. I did this. As you incrementally increase your oxygen efficiency score, as I did over a 2-year period, something changes. It doesn't change overnight, but it certainly does change. Amazingly. Like you will feel the difference in your day-to-day life like you cannot believe when you have a high oxygen efficiency score. But you get things like this. The stroke volume of your heart increases. More about that in a minute. Your capillaries, your tiny blood vessels expand, more oxygen. Your mitochondria, this is called mitochondrial biogenesis. I'm not going to go into that in depth, but they multiply. You get more of them in your cells. That's what gives you more energy, by the way. The feeling of more energy is real because you get more mitochondria. Your insulin sensitivity improves. Your inflammatory baseline markers in your blood, they drop. Mine did, significantly. Your brain blood flow improves. Why? Because your capillaries expand. And you also get more blood vessels. You get more blood vessels and bigger blood vessels. Angiogenesis and arteriogenesis. More blood vessels, bigger blood vessels as you increase your oxygen efficiency score. That's why, as John was talking about with the brain and Dr. Tari, you got a bigger pipe to send more oxygen and as Dr. Tari talked about, a symphony of molecules to improve the blood flow to your brain. The wall of this shield thickens. Imagine it like that. I got a video of it inside the web class. The link's in the show notes for the free web class. So there's a video of this shield. I made an actual real diagram of it. So that shield, your oxygen shield, hardens, and now the same chronic diseases that are attacking other people, they don't disappear from the world that you live in, but they struggle to get inside your body and take foothold. High blood pressure struggles because vessels are elastic and a molecule called nitric oxide signaling is strong, means it makes your blood vessels very elastic. So it's hard to get high blood pressure. I interviewed, by the way, side note, I interviewed Dr. Alta Shoot. Might have her on in a later episode in this series. She was the former president of the World Hypertension Association. She's from South Africa. She has a medical degree and an extra PhD in vascular medicine. She said to me that a person with a higher oxygen efficiency score, because of this molecule nitric oxide flooding your blood vessels on a daily basis, that means that it's very, very hard to get high blood pressure. Type 2 diabetes struggles to take a foothold because your muscles act as what's called a glucose sink, and mitochondria are efficient. What does that mean? It means that your muscles soak up all the sugar because you've got more muscle when you have a higher oxygen efficiency score. Heart attack risk falls because the endothelial function, the flexibility of your arteries, the endothelium is the skin on the inside of your arteries, the cells, that improves, and plaque instability decreases. So a higher oxygen efficiency score means you get less chance for a little plaque to break off, float around and block your arteries. That's why heart attack risk falls. Dementia risk lowers because a molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, that rises and your cerebral blood flow is preserved. So you get one of the things that Dr. Tari discovered with Professor Wisløff, high elite VO2 Max or elite oxygen efficiency score or cardiorespiratory fitness score improves the flow of BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, into your brain. That actually lowers your dementia risk. Cancer progression and risk of cancer events is harder because metabolic control and immune surveillance improve. Now, I got a whole episode on that. And about the whole area of cancer and oxygen efficiencies. I'm not going to go into detail, but the shield means you get less cancer events inside the human body because it doesn't mean you're immune to them totally. It's not like a vaccine, but it sure does lower the risk factor massively compared to the person with a low oxygen efficiency score. So you're not invincible, but you're no longer fragile. You're harder to break, harder to overwhelm. Well, John Ranello says, harder to kill. The oxygen shield framework explains something that modern medicine really does. This is why I invented this learning framework, and I've put it into a part of a significant component of a full 1.5 hour web class. It's totally free for everyone. The oxygen shield shows us that disease doesn't begin when you're diagnosed with a disease. What this shield shows you is it begins when your protective systems become thin. And there's only one proven way to thicken your protective systems of the human body across every major organ system at one time. That's increase your oxygen efficiency. You can't do it with supplements, you can't do it with biohacking, and you can't do it with just motivation alone. High oxygen efficiency creates high oxygen delivery, high oxygen utilization, sustained over time. Now, you don't eliminate the disease from your world, but you have this massive shield that helps you keep it outside your wall and drives down what we call your clinical risk, your diagnosable risk. That's the shield. And this is what all I've tried to do, the thicker it becomes, the harder you are to kill. That's it. Now, let's do even a little bit more deep diving on the oxygen shield. I want to talk more here about two mechanisms so that you can walk away from this episode having been introduced to the oxygen shield and introduced to the deep dive of what the mechanisms are behind the oxygen shield. Let's give you an example. Right? The number one killer of men and women worldwide is heart disease, catastrophic cardiovascular events. So let me get specific. I want to talk to you about something called stroke volume and cardiac output of your heart. Stroke volume is the amount of blood ejected per beat. We can measure that. Cardiac output is the stroke volume times your heart rate. So, a person with a high oxygen efficiency score, like John does for his age and gender, and like I do for mine, that means the left ventricle of your heart remodels itself physiologically. You get something called end diastolic volume increasing. That means the amount of volume of blood that can go through the artery that leaves the heart, called the aorta, increases. Your contractility Contractility improves. That simply means the ability for your blood vessel to squeeze and relax. That improves when you have a high stroke volume and a high cardiac output. Remember, stroke volume, amount of blood ejected per heartbeat. Cardiac output is the stroke volume times your heart rate. I've noticed this next one. Your resting heart rate drops. That is unbelievable. Some days my resting heart rate is 40 beats per minute, which is elite, and it's a result of having a high cardiac output and a high stroke volume. So those are some of the. Here's an analogy. That's the science of it. Let's use an analogy. Imagine two engines. One small engine revving at 4,000 RPM constantly to maintain its speed. One large engine cruising at 1,500 RPM, revolutions per minute, doing the same work. Which heart lasts longer? Which engine? It's a heart. Which experiences less mechanical stress? High oxygen efficiency produces an engine that lets you cruise at a lower revolutions per minute. That's the best way to describe it. It's not actually revolutions, it's number of beats. You get a low shear stress in your arteries. You improve this thing called nitric oxide, which makes your blood vessels more flexible. So that's a molecule that gets secreted into your blood vessels as a result of a high oxygen efficiency score. I'll go into more detail about some of these in a later episode in this series. You get reduced arterial stiffness. If you've never heard of arterial stiffness, when you get to my age, certainly when you get to John's age, most men and women have very inflexible arteries because they've had low nitric oxide secreting into it. But when you have a high oxygen efficiency score, you have a much more increased flexibility of the blood vessel wall, reduced arterial stiffness. So the result, you get lower plaque instability. This thing that breaks off from your artery wall floats around and causes a heart attack because you get a lower clotting risk. You get lower arrhythmia, lower irregular heartbeat risk. You don't get immunity, but you're harder to kill. That's the point. That's the first mechanism. Now let's get back to the one that Dr. Tari was talking about and John Ranello was talking about at the end of his conversation, at the first part of that conversation in this earlier part of the episode. Let's look at this second mechanism that I talked about called BDNF, the brain's repair molecule. So, this is where having a high oxygen efficiency score becomes extraordinary. Brain-derived neurotropic factor, a molecule. You get more of it flooding your brain, the higher you improve your oxygen efficiency score. If you want to know how to do that, that's what I go into. Not only do I teach the learning frameworks in this free web class, I go into detail about how to raise your oxygen efficiency score. So, when you have the correct dose of physical activity for your body, same thing, I'll talk about that in the web class, at a sufficient level over time, particular intensities that challenge the oxygen delivery system, skeletal muscle releases a signaling molecule called myokines. So remember, we're talking about BDNF near the brain, molecules that get into the brain. One of the most important pathways activated with these myokines is something called PGC1. Now, I'm not going to go into the name. In fact, if I was to read out the name, it's called Perioxome Proliferator Activated Receptor Gamma Coactivator Alpha 1. Let's just go with PGC1. How about that? PGC1 stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, more of that organelle in your cell that produces ATP or energy. So the more mitochondria you have, the more energy you have. So you also get an increase of a molecule called irisin, and you get an increase in lactate production. Here's the key. Lactate is not waste. Lactate crosses the blood-brain barrier, and in the brain, lactate acts as a signaling molecule. I find this fascinating, by the way. Acts as a signaling molecule stimulating BDNF expression, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's essentially a fertilizer for the neurons of your brain. That's what BDNF is. What does it do in real life? It promotes neurogenesis in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. Neurogenesis is increased production of brain cells. That's essentially what it is. It enhances synaptic plasticity, the gap between your nerves in the brain are called synapses. So it improves your synaptic plasticity. It strengthens dendritic branching. Dendrites are a part of the nerves and the end part of the nerves, and it improves them branching out. The more of those that you have, the more plasticity you have in the synapses, the gap between your brain cells. I won't go into the complete biology of that, but that's enough for me to explain it. And the more brain cells that you have in areas like the hippocampus, the lower you are at risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. You also get things like it protects your neurons in the brain from something called oxidative stress. And here's the big one. It reduces something called amyloid beta toxicity. One of the things that drives dementia and Alzheimer's is the production of amyloids it's like a fatty substance inside the nerves of your brain. So a high oxygen efficiency score, because you've got more BDNF, reduces amyloid beta toxicity. It improves how much mitochondria you have in the neurons in your brain, and it improves insulin sensitivity in your brain tissue. So this is called what I call a molecular armor. Let me just relate what I talked to you then back to the research of the doctor you heard, Dr. Atefe Tari. So her and her colleagues at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in the Faculty of Medicine there have shown that a person with an elite oxygen efficiency score is associated with preserved brain volume as you age. It means your brain doesn't shrink. And improve cognitive thinking resilience in aging adults. That's what they've shown at the university through their research in real research studies, peer-reviewed ones. Dr. Tari's work demonstrates that a higher oxygen efficiency score correlates with the things I just mentioned. Larger hippocampal volume, part of the brain, slower age-related cortical thinning. So there's a section of the brain where you don't want the cortico to become thinner, so it slows that down. It increases what we call executive function scores, the ability for your brain to have executive functioning, and it improves an area of the brain called white matter integrity. Mechanistically, this links directly to these things. Increased brain flow to the brain, improves angiogenesis, the number of blood vessels which you want to have, reduces inflammation around the nerves of your brain, and it upregulates the BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor pathways. Let me do an analogy. Imagine your brain is a rainforest. Alzheimer's is like a slow drought and a fungal infection. BDNF is a rain plus regenerative ecosystem. High oxygen efficiency increases the rain, the blood flow, fertilizer, the molecule BDNF. It causes new growth, neurogenesis of brain nerves, and it is also pest resistant, reduces inflammation. Without this, neurodegeneration accelerates quietly. With it, declines and slows your brain function. But if you have a high oxygen efficiency score, you build a neurological shield, you become harder to kill. That's that framework based around the oxygen shield. Let me just finish up this episode now on the second learning framework that I go into much deeper detail inside the web class, and I show you in video format what this diagram of this actually looks like. So the AQ engine is a second learning framework that I invented based on the work of Professor Wisløff. So here's the part that most people miss. You don't build the oxygen shield in one heroic workout. You build it through something called signal accumulation. So Professor Ulrik Wisløff, love the way that name rolls off the tongue, by the way, Ulrik, it's a cool name. So Professor Wisløff and his team at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology over there in the Faculty of Medicine. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, he's the boss of that department of the cardiac exercise research group of about 50 to 60 staff that he leads there. That's Professor Wisløff. He developed something called activity quotient points, or AQ. So instead of counting steps or calories, which drives me mad for the people that do it, Professor Wisløff has quantified cardiovascular strain relative to your fitness level across a rolling 7 days. The magic number, 100 AQ points. So from the research study, from his actual research in the lab, and a large cohort study called the Hunt study up there in Norway, he showed that maintaining 100 activity quotient points on a rolling 7 days does these things: 20 to 30% lower cardiovascular mortality, lower chance of you dying from heart disease, reduced heart failure incidence, reduced risk of atrial fibrillation, 26% reduction of dementia risk, a 15% reduction in a cancer diagnosis event of a cancer event. I think it's a 54% decrease in the clinical risk of complications from type 2 diabetes, 30% decrease in risk of complications from obesity. This is not correlation fluff. This is from long-term population level data, and as Professor Wisløff told me, from actual lab tests he's done in the lab on over 5,000 people, which is a big number, by the way. So, why activity quotient compounds, AQ points? Imagine, this is another analogy. I like the analogies to try and simplify these things out, because some of these ideas are complex. Imagine 2 bank accounts. One receives occasional deposits. One receives daily compounding deposits. AQ is the compounding account. Every interval session of the correct dose of physical activity you do, go and look at the videos of John Ranello online. Go and look at what he's doing as a 75-year-old man. I've got some in the web class. I'm putting some in there because they're so cool. Every zone 2 session that you do, every spike of your heart rate above the 85% of maximum, your body doesn't rest overnight. It integrates what we call signal. Overnight, things like this change in your body after you finish using the correct dose of physical activity this day by tracking your activity quotient points and building it up to 100 on a rolling 7 days. Capillaries expand, mitochondria multiply, stroke volume of the heart increases, insulin sensitivity improves, BDNF upregulates, which is what you want. Multiple systems adapt together. This is system level protection. I cannot tell you how unbelievable my body feels after reaching 100 activity quotient points. So we've built that into our software, and how to track that. It's so simple, it's ridiculous, because it's done automatically. So why does 100 activity quotient points, the research from Professor Wisløff, make you hard to kill? Because it forces repeated cardiac output elevation, stimulates the growth of blood vessels, angiogenesis. It elevates something called lactate signaling, sustains this PGC1 activation. It enhances mitochondrial density, which means more mitochondria, more energy, more ATP. ATP stands for, those of you who are first-time listeners, adenosine triphosphate. Someone asks you, what's energy molecule in the body called? ATP. That's what it's called. It maintains nitric oxide availability. You get a constant flow of this molecule into your blood vessels, which makes them flexible. That is so critical as you age. Unbelievable. It suppresses chronic inflammation and sustains that BDNF production. It's not fitness, it's a biological improvement in the infrastructure of your body. So, let me wrap up this episode now. What I decided to do was this, because I kept getting asked this lots and lots of different questions, and I go, how would I, in the real world, in real time, on a daily basis, use a piece of technology to track my longevity, to become a longevity builder? I created this, the Longevity Builder Health Lab. It's a software platform of, I think it's about 12 or 13 different applications, but 6 core applications, ones that you can use on a regular basis to build longevity in a real time. The things that I've just been speaking about here in these 2 frameworks, 2 of the 6 frameworks that we're going to talk about in this mini-series. Nothing in health technology space that I've seen up until what I created with my software development team integrates these things: oxygen efficiency, AQ accumulation, activity quotient points, molecular education, risk tracking, and a forecasting model of where your body will be in 90 days from now based on what you've done this week and this month. So 2 of the 12 applications inside the Longevity Builder Health Lab platform, so it's one whole platform, you log into, They track, so two of the applications directly track. One is called the Oxygen Efficiency app, and one is called the AQ Engine app. So there's 6 core apps, and then there's another 10 or so additional applications. The reason I built it is because of this. There's no wearable technology right now that does all these things. There's no app that does all of the things that what I've done with the Longevity Builder Health Lab. There's no hospital that does this for you, and no medical portal, and no individual medical doctor. I created a custom-built longevity technology. It tracks, it forecasts, it teaches, and it quantifies protection in real time, simply. So adults aren't hoping, they're building. All right, let me close off with this. John Ranello, at 75 years of age, who you're going to hear from again in episode 2 of this mini-series. John, at 75, with an oxygen efficiency score of 48.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute, and me, at a hair's breadth off 60 as I record this, literally a few days away, mine is 54.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute. These aren't ego numbers. They represent my enlarged stroke volume of my heart, a better cardiac output, more efficient, suppressed vascular stress, more BDNF, better brain function in the hippocampus region, compounding activity intelligence. What these two numbers, mine and John's, represent for our age and gender, and you can get yours and find out what yours is if you don't know inside the Longevity Builder Health Lab. They represent improved infrastructure, they represent a better armor, they represent what John and I both agreed on the title of this mini-series. They represent your body becoming hard to kill. We are going to talk more about this in episode 2, the human body, how to build a system that is hard to kill. I can't wait to share more moments with you from John Ranello, because I'm fascinated by all the work that he does and the conversation, and I can't wait to share with you more doctors in the next episode and 2 additional frameworks, learning frameworks from my book and from my software, the Longevity Builder Health Lab. All right, everybody, see you in episode 2, the body, how to build a system that is hard to kill. Bye for now.
We're not just launching a new book called Longevity Builder to teach you the steps. We're introducing something revolutionary, the Longevity Builder Health Lab. This groundbreaking technology will tell you in real time exactly how you're tracking with your longevity factors in health span risk profile. Imagine knowing your oxygen efficiency score, a measure 4 times more impactful than smoking or obesity on your risk of dying. We're talking about the single greatest lever you can pull to transform your health. Ready to stop guessing and start building your future? Visit longevitybuilders.com today and discover how the Longevity Builder Health Lab can unlock your healthiest, longest life. Don't just learn how to improve your health, know how you're doing right now. As we wrap up today's episode, please remember that all the information shared here is for educational and informational purposes only. It should not be interpreted as medical advice or used in place of consultation with a qualified healthcare provider. If you plan on making any changes to your exercise routine, diet, medication, or lifestyle, we strongly recommend consulting your doctor or a certified medical professional first. You acknowledge that any decisions or actions you take based on today's show are solely your responsibility, and we accept no liability for any outcomes. This content is not a replacement for professional medical guidance. If you have any concerns or questions about your personal health, please reach out to your healthcare provider. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.